Hello everyone, my name is Daniel, and today we're doing something a little bit different, which hopefully that's okay. I hope you all had a Merry Christmas. I made some woodworking projects for Christmas presents for some young friends of mine, and I thought I'd show a little bit of how I did that. It involves Blender, but rather than rendering a digital image, I guess, I rendered it out of wood, so we'll get started with that. What I wanted to make was some rubber band guns, and so in Blender here I just made a little design, mainly just using bevel, solidify, and some boolean modifiers, because all of these parts actually have the holes and whatnot cut out. And then I just made sure that the mechanism here works correctly, so if this rotates out of the way, then this can spring forward. And then I just spread all those out so that they were in a grid pattern, like so, and rendered that out as an image. Then over in Krita, or whatever image editing program you prefer, I just selected the alpha channel of that and filled a layer with black, and then I shrunk the selection by 2 pixels and deleted that to make an outline. And then I just printed this image off on a piece of paper, 8.5 by 11 paper, as the plan to glue on the wood. I have that file as a PDF, as well as the directions for finishing it, because like I said, I made these as like a kit that had to be assembled. Those files are both uploaded to my website, as well as just a text file with some basic notes and instructions about what you need and tools and whatnot, which I'm going to talk about in the video too. Anyway, if it seems like something you'd be interested in trying to make, check the description for a download link. Once I had the design from Blender and had it all rendered out and converted to this outline format, I just printed that out on a sheet of letter paper, 8.5 by 11 inches. And then with this new layout I made, you can actually just should be able to cut it into 3 parts and have the plans for 2 of the pistols. But originally the layout wasn't so organized. I hadn't packed the UVs, if you will. So I had to cut all the pieces out. This is a piece of poplar wood, which is, it's a hardwood. It is pretty durable, but it's easy to work with. It's not too hard. It's just over 1/4 inch thick. Once I had that piece of wood, I just glued the plan onto the top of it using some watered down white glue. And then once that is dried, we're to this point here where it needs to be cut out. And to do that, we need to go over to scroll saw. The first thing I want to do on the scroll saw is just divide all of these pieces into separate parts. I'm not really going to try to get close to cutting out the actual shape. I'm just going to separate all the pieces first. Alright, now that I've got the pieces separated, there are 2 sets of them that are the same. So the handle covers and the sort of side of the chamber part are identical, and I want to cut them out at the same time. So to do that, I'm going to go on the drill press and we'll drill 2 holes through where the dowels will eventually be inserted, and we'll pin them together before cutting out the actual shape on the scroll saw. So with this right here, I'm just making sure that these 2 pieces are roughly lined up with each other. It doesn't have to be perfect, you just want to make sure you don't have some part of it sticking off over the edge of the piece below. And once it's lined up, we'll just drill through. Alright, once we've drilled through a little bit, we'll take a dowel rod that's a pin. This is a 3/16 drill bit, and this dowel rod is also 3/16, which means it's a pretty tight fit, but once you push it through a few times, it works pretty well. And you want it tight so that it holds the pieces together well. But then if you just put that dowel rod through both of them, it'll keep them in the same place. Make sure everything's lined up again, and we'll drill a second hole. And with the second hole drilled, we'll take a second 3/16 dowel rod and we'll pin those together. And now we can cut both of these out at the same time on the scroll saw. We also need to do the same for this piece, so let's go ahead and do that. Alright, now that I've got these pinned together, I'm just going to cut out all of the pieces. I'm going to try to cut just on the outside of the line. It's always better to cut a tiny bit too big than to cut into the piece of the wood, because you can clean up, if something's a little bit too big, you can clean it up with sandpaper or something. If you cut some of the wood out, it's a lot harder to fix. Alright, I've got all the pieces cut out. Next thing to do is to drill all the holes through all the pieces to assemble them. And to do that, we need to do some, make sure everything, and to do that we need to make sure that everything lines up correctly. So to start with, I'll be taking this piece and using the holes we already drilled as a guide, I'll line this up, drill through this piece, and then once that's done, I'll put a pin through all 3 pieces, and then once they're all pinned together, I'll drill the other 2 holes through that so that all fits together. And then we'll do the same for this piece. We'll make sure this lines up, we'll drill a hole through this piece, pin all 3 together, line it up how we want, drill the other hole, and then exact same process for the handle pieces. So starting with this piece, I've got it lined up. I can see through the hole that the mark on the paper for the other hole is in the right place, so I'm just going to drill here first. Alright, now that I've got that hole drilled, I'll take the other 2 pieces and we'll pin them all together. And then I want to make sure that the top of the gun is flat and not bent like this or like this. So I'll just take another piece of wood and use that to hold everything straight while I drill. Now I'm going to need to sand the top of this because it's not quite flush. Alright, I didn't record sanding it because I'd have to move the camera, but I've just sanded it now so that this is flat. If you have it lined up right, it'll be perfectly flat, and otherwise it will, it won't be. So then I can push it up against this and it'll hold everything straight. So now we have these 3 pieces ready to fit together. We can do the same for the handle. Then I will pin all of this together. Then what I want to do is take a piece of wood, something that has 2 parallel edges, it's about the right thickness, and I'm going to put the edge of the gun on that, and I'm going to rotate this until this line is parallel to the edge so that I know that the handle is in straight. So about right there is correct. It's not an exact measurement. And then holding that together in that position, I'm going to drill this second hole for the handle. Alright, the final 2 holes are for the moving parts, and they need to be pretty precise. Well, the first thing we can do that's pretty simple is we can just drill a hole through each of these exactly where they're marked, because that's where they need to be. So once you have that, you just want to use something to hold it in place, and then putting the trigger in place, we can look and see that the mark on the gun is in the right place, which it always will be as long as these are cut out accurately and you drill the first hole correctly. So we'll just go ahead and trust that that's correct, and we'll drill right where. Alright, now that we're here and we have all of these holes drilled, we don't need the paper on anymore. So the next step is going to be using the sander to sand off all of the paper and clean up things like this edge here where I didn't cut right to the line, because it's easier to get it straight on the sander. Alright, I've sanded the paper off of all the pieces, so all that's left to do now is to finish sanding it all by hand. To do that, I just have random scraps of wood with sandpaper glued or attached to them in different ways. You could also use a rasp, possibly. But all we're going to do is on a couple of the pieces, we're going to put a bit of a bevel on the corners. And then on some of the other pieces, just smooth them out so that they feel nice to the touch. Here I've got a piece of wood just wedged in a drawer. You want a corner like this to be able to sand on because it makes it a lot easier to work on the pieces. So if you have just a scrap of plywood or something, you can clamp that to your workbench or whatever. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to sand this back at like I'm going to sand it like a 45-degree angle until I bring the edge back to like here or so. So there's a bevel all the way around it. And then once I've done that, I'll start doing it at different angles to get sort of a rounded over corner, a round bevel, so that it feels nice to hold in your hand, basically. Just like that. And then I just have to do that on all of the different sides. Alright, now that I've brought this straight bevel all the way around the whole piece, I'm going to go over it again, but instead of sanding at a 45-degree angle, I'm going to do two passes, one at a steeper angle and one flatter, to start rounding over the whole shape. Alright, once that's done and I've got this piece all sanded and shaped, I'm just going to swap out this very coarse sanding block for a finer one and go over it to smooth it out even more. So that's one of the handles completely done. I just need to repeat that process for the other side. So then, with those two done, we can put them aside. Then for these pieces, I do the same sort of thing, except I just leave it with a straight 45 bevel. You could finish this however you wanted, actually, but this is just sort of what I did. Alright, so I've got top and bottom now for the sides of the gun done. For the handle and the barrel, all I do is round over a couple of these corners a little bit, and then I just take the 220 grit sandpaper and I just go over all the edges so that they feel smooth and not sharp, or like you're going to get a splinter on them. Once all the parts have been sanded, we just need to put them together, and to do that we need some dowel rod pins to go in the holes that we drilled. So this is a 3/16 inch dowel to fit in the 3/16 inch holes that we drilled. Yeah, these are just about an inch long. They just need to be able to go through all three layers, long enough to fit through all three layers of the gun, and have a little bit sticking out on either side, which you can sand off after you glue it. So I have a little mark here, the measure, and if you just take a utility knife and sort of roll it. And you'll need 11 of these pins. Once you have all the pins cut out, you should go ahead and do a dry fit just to make sure everything is fitting together nicely. So to do that, you just need to take pins and put the pieces together. Make sure everything's lining up. And then once you have all of those together, we can put these on too, you don't have to. Now for these parts, you may want to drill the hole a little bit bigger so that it spins easier on these pins. And as long as that's the case, it should work fine. So then we need a spring. I like to bend the end to try to make it flat a little bit. Bending springs can be kind of hard. You usually have to bend it quite a bit past where you want it, and then it'll spring back some. So then if that's flat, it should fit on this little tab pretty well without slipping off. And we may want to actually take the second link and squish it all down a bit. So that fits nicely on there. Then we just want it to be about so long, so we'll just cut it off. And then I'll bend that end down a touch as well. So then to fit that in there, all we have to do is notch this onto that little tab. And then we need to insert it into the gun with sort of a rotating motion, like so. And once we've done that, we just have to line up the hole and put in a pin. Once that's done, the trigger is functional. Then all you have to do is take this release mechanism and insert it in from the top so that this notch fits over the top of the trigger. If it fits really snugly between the pieces, then you want to sand this piece so that it's thinner and so that it will rotate easily inside the gun once it's glued. One other thing I forgot to do is to use that rounded sandpaper to make a little notch in the end. Then once you have that little notch in the end and you've tested it to make sure all of the parts are moving freely, you can load a rubber band onto it. And you can do a test fire just to make sure that it shoots. And if that works, then you're all set to take it apart and finish it. Or I actually gave them as a kit to be assembled as gifts because I thought that'd be kind of cool. So there's instructions that you can print off for as far as finishing it, which involves taking it apart and putting it back together again with glue, and then cutting off the ends of these little pins with a little saw, and then sanding them flush with sanding them down so they're flush with the face of the pieces. I've put online the pattern that you can print off to glue on the wood to make all the pieces, as well as the instructions for finishing it if anyone wants to make them one. If any of you feel like making one yourself, I know it's a little different from normal Blender stuff, but who knows? Maybe some of you are woodworkers as well. So yeah, that's about it for this one. Hopefully it was still interesting, even though it was so different from what I normally do. But this is kind of what I've been working on in my spare time, so thought I might as well make a video about it. Anyway, that's all I've got for this one. Hopefully it was interesting. Thanks for watching.